Welcome to Breaking the News Plus on this Wednesday night. Whoa, it was a doozy in Minnesota politics this morning because the president of the United States, Donald Trump, has endorsed Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, for governor in the state of Minnesota as the Republican candidate. Now, Mike Lindell did not win the endorsing of the GOP party here in the state. He came in third place. He's still running for governor, and today he, too, was surprised that President Trump said, I picked that guy. To talk about it, political analyst Brian McClung, deep history with the Republican Party in Minnesota. Hello, Brian.
Hi, Jana. How are you?
I'm well. I've been looking forward to this conversation because even Mike Lindell said he was surprised to get the endorsement of President Trump. What say you?
Well, obviously, for starters, Trump's endorsement is a major development in the Republican primary for governor of Minnesota. Donald Trump is, without a doubt, the most influential figure with Republican primary voters. So this endorsement instantly gives Mike Lindell a major boost, almost certainly changes the trajectory of the race.
I want to talk a little bit about what people are talking about locally, like what's happening here in Minnesota. And the Minnesota Republican Party chair said this: "We were surprised by President Trump's endorsement of Mike Lindell. We strongly support the president and his agenda, but Minnesota Republicans must choose the candidate best positioned to defeat Amy Klobuchar." It then goes on to say Lindell wants Minnesota Republicans to overlook his serious financial baggage, his public record showing tens of thousands in delinquency property taxes, his significant electability concerns, unanswered questions surrounding his running mate, et cetera, et cetera. Minnesota cannot afford to nominate a ticket that gives Democrats an easy target. They are very plainly saying they disagree, Mr. President. Lindell should not be the guy.
Yeah, and that in and of itself is striking, right? To see a state Republican Party chair in any state criticize President Trump and push back on his endorsement. I mean, that's a story right there. I think now Alex Plekich, the Republican Party chairman here in Minnesota, he feels like he has to stand up for the party's endorsed candidate in Kendall Qualls. Chair Plekich has already had some pushback from activists when he sort of gave Speaker of the House Lisa Demuth a free pass in deciding to run in the primary after that, and after saying she would abide by the endorsement. Chair Plekich came out and said, well, there were some irregularities with the voting system at the Republican Party convention, so if somebody wants to run, they can run. That made a lot of activists mad. The party faithful who go to precinct caucuses, who go to their House district conventions, who go on to be delegates at the state convention, that is the end-all be-all for those 2,000 or so activists who make up the party convention. And so I think he felt like he had to defend the endorsed candidate in Kendall Qualls. And so I think that's why you see him pushing back here on the president's pick. But I think the interesting thing ultimately is that with this endorsement of Mike Lindell, I think that the race actually consolidates around Mike Lindell and Speaker of the House Lisa Demuth.
Okay.
I think that even though Kendall Qualls has the official Republican Party Minnesota endorsement, the Trump endorsement gives Lindell a different and potentially more powerful credential. And Lisa Demuth is running the best campaign of the three. I mean, she is out there. She has an independent expenditure group that is, fighting on her behalf, that is running TV ads now, that is getting her name out there. And she has credentials. She has some built-in name ID and some awareness from being Speaker of the House. So I think, interestingly, the Trump endorsement, I think, does the most damage ultimately to Kendall Qualls, even though he has the Republican Party endorsement, because this sends a different signal to those true believers, Republican voters, who might normally look to the party endorsement to help them make their decision. I think they would much rather and much more importantly look to Donald Trump to get that kind of signal.
Yeah, that was kind of my frame when I think about the three Republican candidates the Republican primary voters will choose from on August 11th. They have the party endorsed candidate is Kendall Qualls. The Trump endorsed candidate is Mike Lindell. And many argue, smart Republicans, the best candidate is Lisa Demuth. Those are three totally different people, and you decide on each of those merits. And so you're saying, and I've heard this too, that this does not bode well for Kendall Qualls' campaign. He should throw his support to Mike Lindell, and then it's between Lindell and Demuth. And if that's the case, who will Minnesota Republicans choose between Demuth and Lindell?
Yeah, and I think that's an open question at this point. I think that still, Mike Lindell has the highest name ID of these three Republican candidates. We saw that in the Star Tribune poll and in other polling that's taken place. I think that Lisa Demuth is running the best campaign. I think she's very active. She's out there. It's a professional campaign that is, doing direct mail, running TV ads, doing digital advertising. So I think she is going to make a strong case. I don't think there's any scenario where Kendall Qualls, quote unquote, drops out. Okay. He won the Republican Party endorsement. He is going to carry that banner till August 11th. There's no reason for him to step aside. And I think he personally doesn't see it the way that I'm describing it or others have described it to you. I think he still believes that Republican Party stamp is the most important factor in this race. And that has been true for the last 30 years in Minnesota. I mean, Republican endorsed candidates have almost always won, statewide primaries. So he's not going anywhere. It's not really going to be between Lindell and Lisa Demuth. I think that's where the race is headed, but I don't think that means Kendall Qualls is going to be a distant third place. I think we're looking at a race that shapes up as a 35-30 kind of race. This is, I don't think there's going to be necessarily a breakaway winner on primary election night, which is why it's going to be fun. And I'm excited to be at KARE 11 again for that election night. But the turnout in these Republican primaries is crazy low. Republicans typically just don't vote in primaries. And that's in part because that endorsed party candidate has won so frequently that many kind of casual Republican voters don't even just think to themselves, we don't need to vote in the primary. The party has already picked the candidate. We'll just show up in November. So
won't that change in recent this time?
History, I think it will change, but I think that's the biggest question for us, and the biggest question in terms of who might win the primary is, will turnout increase enough and in a way that either supports Mike Lindell or supports Lisa Demuth, that's going to be the deciding factor. And every pundit will say this every election, it's all about turnout, right? We know that. That's kind of a broken record thing to say. But again, it is all about turnout. Which of those two candidates in particular can get the extra voters, those kind of casual Republican primary voters, to actually show up and vote? The Republican primary turnout, for example, in 2018, the last time we had an actual contested Republican primary race between Jeff Johnson, who had the Republican Party endorsement, and my old boss, Tim Pawlenty, who is making a return to Minnesota politics, that we thought having Tim Pawlenty run, a guy who had 99% name ID, who raised $1 million in a week when he got into the race, we thought, we could get casual Republican voters to show up and vote for Tim Pawlenty. We were wrong. The turnout in that 2018 primary was about 14% of eligible voters. So nobody showed up. And again, because the Republican voters are just not used to showing up in primaries. So then that begs the question, who will be there? Who is going to actually, absentee voting is open now. So between now and August 11th, who are those casual or occasional Republican primary voters who are going to make the decision to get engaged in this race? Is Lisa Demuth going to be able to reach those voters and make the argument that she's best positioned to win in November, so show up in August and make sure she wins? Or are the casual voters going to be more Trump-aligned, MAGA-aligned voters who are going to say, Trump says Mike Lindell's our guy. Let's show up and make sure Mike Lindell's on the ballot. And at this point, we don't know, right? We really don't know. We'll see some of that momentum, I think, over the next couple of weeks. And I think as we see potentially polling, in the beginning of August might give us a read on what that's going to look like. It's also very hard to poll these primary elections, again, because turnout is so low. So you might be conducting a poll, but those people in your survey are not actually representative of who's going to vote in the primary. So this does become a real wild card kind of race. Because
they would have to vote in the primary, though, to pick Mike Lindell, because Mike Lindell doesn't have the endorsement. So either way, if it's Dameth or Lindell, you got to show up and vote for your candidate.
Well, right. And that's the third scenario is if the electorate, acts the same way the Republican primary electorate has acted for the last, dozen Republican primaries, then Kendall Qualls could win.
Right.
So, even though I'm saying I think he's probably in third place as a result of this endorsement, I would not fully count him out. Again, because it's such an unknown as to who will show up and vote in a Republican primary in Minnesota. And that's different from Democrats, right? Like you look at the Democrat primary in Minnesota, the last two times Democrats picked a candidate for governor, they chose the candidate who was not endorsed at the DFL state convention. So, Mark Dayton in 2010 did not win the party endorsement, but wins the DFL primary for governor. And then in 2018, Tim Walz, not endorsed at the DFL state convention, but he wins the state DFL primary contest. So Democrats have had a tradition in Minnesota of showing up and voting and oftentimes picking a more mainstream or moderate or, more centrist style candidate over a more liberal, DFL party endorsed candidate. And they vote. They know the primary matters, and their voters are showing up. Republicans, it's hard to say who's going to be there.
This just got so much more complicated. Brian McClung, you always do this to me. I appreciate your time tonight. I look forward to working with you on August 11th. It's going to be one for the record books, I'm sure. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you.
Great.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Thanks,
we'll
Jana.
see you. That's all for Breaking the News Plus on this Wednesday night. Take care.